my generator.
It was removed for violations.
You had no right.
The HOA decides that.
It was right here. Who took it?
The HOA, Mr. Mercer. It violated regulations.
You had no right. Every right.
The night the blizzard hit, my house went dark in seconds. Heat died. Alarms went silent. Outside, snow buried the streets and emergency crews were stretched thin. By morning, I discovered the unthinkable. My backup generator was gone, seized under an HOA rule about appearance, right in the middle of a winter emergency. Pipes were freezing. Power was out for miles. And the people responsible had no idea whose safety they just gambled with or how quickly a petty decision could spiral into something far bigger. How far can neighborhood power go before it crosses a dangerous line? Before everything unraveled, life in the neighborhood was quiet in the way people expect when they move into a managed community. Clean streets, trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes lined up like soldiers. The kind of place where nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. I chose it for that reason. After years of unpredictable work hours and long nights on call, I wanted a home that felt stable, orderly, and easy to maintain. I kept to myself. I followed the rules. My house looked like every other one from the street. Neutral colors, no clutter, nothing that stood out. Most neighbors barely knew what I did for a living, and that was intentional. Around here, people talked. Information traveled faster than courtesy. So I waved politely, paid my HOA dues on time, and lived my life without friction. Winters, though, were different. The area sat just far enough outside the city that power outages were common during storms. Ice brought down lines. Snow delayed repairs. After one particularly bad winter a few years back, I invested in a portable backup generator. Nothing flashy, nothing permanent, just a practical safety measure, tucked neatly beside my house and used only when necessary. It kept the heat running, the lights on, and the security system alive when everything else went dark. The HOA had a reputation, nothing extreme but rigid. Their rules were thick, written in vague language that left room for interpretation. Enforcement came and went depending on who was in charge that year. Most residents learned to adapt. A warning letter here, a fine there. It was easier to comply than to question it. Things shifted when the board leadership changed. Suddenly, enforcement became aggressive. Notices appeared faster. Inspections felt constant. Small issues were treated like serious violations. The tone of the neighborhood changed, even if the houses looked the same. People spoke more quietly at the mailbox. Garages stayed shut. No one wanted attention. I noticed it, but I didn't feel targeted, not at first. My property was clean. My generator wasn't visible from the street unless someone walked right up to the side of my house. It had never been an issue before. I assumed common sense would prevail, especially during emergencies. That assumption would turn out to be dangerously wrong. As winter deepened, weather reports grew more ominous. Storm warnings stacked up. Local agencies urged residents to prepare for extended outages and limited emergency access. I checked my supplies, tested the generator, and went back to my routine. To me, it was just another precaution, no different than salt on the steps or extra blankets in the closet. What I didn't realize was that someone had been paying very close attention to my property. Not out of concern, but out of authority. Somewhere between routine patrols and selective enforcement, my house had become a point of interest. A rule that had never mattered before was suddenly relevant. A line in the bylaws, buried and vague, was waiting to be used. The storm arrived faster than predicted. Snow fell hard and heavy, blanketing everything in hours. Roads disappeared. Power flickered, then failed completely. The neighborhood went silent except for the wind. In moments like that, preparation stops being theoretical. It becomes survival. That was the last calm night. By morning, the order I'd trusted, the rules I'd followed, and the quiet life I'd built inside that community were already slipping away, set in motion by a decision that valued appearances over safety and control over reason. By the time daylight pushed through the storm clouds, the situation had already escalated beyond inconvenience. The house was colder than it should have been. The silence inside felt wrong, no hum of power, no steady reassurance of heat circulating through the walls. I assumed the generator had failed. Mechanical problems happen, especially in extreme weather. I pulled on boots, opened the side gate, and stopped cold. The generator wasn't there. In its place were clean tracks in the snow, deliberate and recent, cutting away from the side of the house and toward the street. Someone hadn't stumbled upon it. Someone had taken it, in the middle of a declared winter emergency, in a neighborhood where roads were barely passable and help was already stretched thin. At first, confusion overrode anger. Theft didn't make sense here. The community prided itself on order, oversight, and rules. Everything had a process. Everything had paperwork. And that realization landed hard. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was enforcement. The timing made it worse. Power was out across the entire area. Cell service was spotty. Temperatures were dropping by the hour. Without the generator, the house was losing heat fast. Pipes were at risk. Security systems were offline. What should have been a manageable outage was turning into a serious vulnerability. I went back inside and started documenting everything. Photos of the empty space, the tracks, the temperature readings inside the house. Years of working around emergencies had trained me to think clearly when things went sideways. Panic didn't help, records did. That's when the notice appeared electronically. A violation logged during the storm. A reference to a bylaw about temporary equipment visible on the exterior of a property. A line about corrective action taken by the association. No mention of safety, no acknowledgement of the weather, just procedure. The realization settled in slowly and heavily. The HOA hadn't just cited the generator. They had seized it. As the day dragged on, the cold became relentless. The house creaked as materials contracted. Water pressure dropped. Neighbors stayed inside, blinds closed, conserving what heat they could. No one came out. No one intervened. The association's authority had created a quiet compliance that was hard to miss. The breaking point came when the temperature inside the house dropped low enough that breath fogged the air. Ice crept along the edges of windows. Pipes groaned in the walls, warning of damage that would ripple for months if nothing changed. Outside, the storm still raged, and emergency services were prioritizing life-or-death calls across the county. This was no longer about comfort or inconvenience. This was about safety, liability, and a line that had been crossed without hesitation. What made it worse was the HOA's confidence. Notices continued to appear, automated and emotionless, documenting compliance actions taken in accordance with governing documents. There was no exception for extreme weather, no emergency clause, no human judgment. The association wasn't just enforcing rules, it was proving a point. Control mattered more than consequence. That was when I stopped treating the situation as a homeowner dispute and started treating it as a public safety incident. I began pulling records that most residents never see. Emergency declarations, infrastructure failure reports, county-level advisories issued before the storm. The generator wasn't decorative. It was essential equipment during a declared emergency. Removing it hadn't just endangered one household. It had violated protocols designed to protect lives during widespread outages. The HOA didn't realize that their authority existed inside a much larger system, one with oversight, one with consequences. By late afternoon, word began to spread, not through gossip but through official channels. A piece of equipment had been confiscated during an emergency response window. Documentation showed it was done knowingly. Signatures were attached. Time-stamps were undeniable. What the HOA framed as aesthetic enforcement was now being reviewed under a very different lens. County offices took notice. So did emergency management. So did legal departments accustomed to dealing with overreach, negligence, and liability exposure. The situation shifted rapidly, and the association felt it before they understood it. Requests for clarification went unanswered. Internal emails multiplied. The same rigid structure that had empowered them now slowed their ability to respond. The generator was located quickly, stored, tagged, and logged as seized property. That detail alone raised alarms. Associations weren't authorized to confiscate emergency equipment, especially during an active crisis. What they'd done wasn't just petty, it was reckless. As pressure mounted, the HOA's confidence collapsed into silence. No more notices, no more automated warnings. The neighborhood remained dark, but the balance of power had flipped. Residents who had stayed quiet began to realize how close they'd come to being next, how fragile their sense of security really was. By the time the generator was ordered to be returned, it wasn't just about restoring heat to one house. It was about exposure. The association's actions were being examined for patterns. Past complaints resurfaced. Prior enforcement decisions were reevaluated. The storm had done more than knock out power. It had stripped away the illusion of harmless authority. And as the storm finally began to fade, one question lingered heavily over the neighborhood. If this was what they did during a crisis, what else had they been getting away with all along? By the time the storm finally eased, the snow began to melt, and the wind softened. The generator hummed steadily in the corner of my yard once more. The house slowly returned to a livable temperature, and the danger to pipes and household systems passed. But the events of the past few days left a mark far deeper than frozen walls and temporary discomfort. What had begun as a simple winter preparedness measure had escalated into a confrontation that revealed the fragile balance of authority and accountability in the community I had trusted. The first order of business, of course, was the immediate restoration of normal life. I checked every connection, every circuit, every backup safety system I had in place. The generator worked flawlessly, keeping the lights steady and the heat flowing. I walked through the house, inspecting walls, windows, and pipes for hidden damage caused by the hours of freezing temperatures. None of it had been catastrophic, but the anxiety of those hours left a lasting impression. I could feel the weight of vulnerability lingering in every corner. That awareness, that sudden understanding of how quickly normalcy can be disrupted, was far more powerful than any inconvenience a storm could produce. Yet the generator itself was only the surface of the aftermath. The true resolution came in how the HOA was held accountable. Once it became clear that their seizure of essential emergency equipment had crossed not only moral lines but legal boundaries, external oversight stepped in. County authorities, emergency management offices, and legal consultants reviewed the situation with a scrutiny that the HOA had not anticipated. Every rule they had enforced in the past was suddenly open to examination, and the consequences were immediate.